There you go. I'm live now. Or not live, but online.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Today, we're reciprocating the time spent with our dear Robert Nugent, who has got his own YouTube channel. We have had a few interviews on Robert's channel, and I think he's been on my channel once so far. So the coin flipped for me to host today. And Robert, it's great to have you back. It's great to be speaking with you again. How are things?
Things are doing very well. Yeah, it's spilling rain here. The weather's been awful. Every time I say I'm going to get some exercise in the evening, and I come home and it's even worse weather than before. A great excuse to stay at home. But I'm too sedentary at the moment. So, but yeah, things have been good and exciting times in the church. So it is at the moment.
Yeah, true enough. Well, we're officially into spring apparently, and it's been raining for sure, but we need the rain to blossom the plants coming
Eh,
through. Let them come at least
Exactly.
today.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. I've always got an excuse myself in the evenings after work, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of things on the agenda here today, folks. We've got a couple of announcements of rosary gatherings, especially for men, what's happening there. We're going to mention that. We're going to maybe pick up in a few of Robert's recent videos. There's quite a few and some good topics. So we're going to ask him a little bit more about that and where he sees things at. We're talking between the banking sectors, we're talking about things in the church. And one subject we might speak about in ourselves just to break the ice on the topic of mental health, especially for men. You know, we're here gathering. If you're watching these videos for any reason, whatever video made you subscribe once you found it, you're finding our channels. We're just average men, both ex-seminarians, looking to join the priesthood. We left. We've had our own struggles with faith, life in general, and now, well, Robert's ahead of the game with me, being married with kids. I've just been married a few months. How things have been up and down in life, and I think I heard in an interview you spoke a little bit about that recent, Robert. So we maybe get a little bit roundabout there, and anything else that comes along the way. You know,
Yeah.
we're well
Yeah.
comfortable with each other now, and had a few videos, and a lot seems to be happening. That's one thing I would like to point up since relaunching this and talking with you. I've had a few good interviews myself with others, and I've hosted them, they've hosted me. I think there's something happening in terms of a bit of better networking over this side of the pond, and
Yeah.
these people I'm speaking to seem to feel the same, and it's them that's mentioning it first, and I'd like to think and hope that whatever we're doing, giving it to God, that this is going to grow into something because people are asking me about you, you're telling me about other people, asking you about these ones. There's just something in the making that seems to be building a bit of momentum. Would you say so?
Absolutely. I mean, there's definitely a momentum coming. Um, it's driving conversations around Ireland. It's driving people to think about the faith, and you can. I mean, people reach out to me all the time. Like I was just before I was talking to you, I was just mentioning. Somebody called me and he was just telling me about how his sister died in the 1990s, and but they had a miracle in their house where the rosary turned to gold, and that kind of helped them uh, deal with her death, this her his sister. And it was just this amazing conversation. And you kind of, when you're talking to people, when you're out there talking to people and seeing what's happening in the church, you do realize, that there is something greater than us involved in this. You can see the power of God working in different places. And I suppose that's why I think it's a really exciting time to be Catholic. Challenging, but exciting in the sense, Christ and Our Lady, they haven't abandoned us. They are present, and they're calling us back to encounter him at this moment in time, back to to really dig into the gospel, to dig into our faith, and to bring out all these treasures in the church in this moment in time. So I find it very, very encouraging, because you do hear a lot of negativity, what's this and that scandal and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, the only person that you can shine a light on is yourself. I can't solve that scandal and I can't solve that problem, but I can solve myself. I can be more authentic. I can help more. listen more, and bring people along to encounter Christ, which is what Christianity, the core essence is of Christians, is to shine light in people's lives. So yeah, great time, great time at this moment in time. But it'll be interesting to see how this all progresses on in the next couple of months and years and so forth. I think you and myself, we all sense that this is like a time of prophecy in a way, with Akisha, Garabandal, and all these things. And I know people say, "Oh, they're," people put too much emphasis on these things, but when Our Lady says something 60 years ago, we kind of see it passing at this moment in time. I do think it's important we take heed of what she was trying to say to us.
Yeah, for sure. I think when you mentioned that, one of my other videos, it was Catechism number 67. It speaks about how, again, nothing's added or taken away from Christ's full revelation in Scripture. But the fact that what's happening now, God still wills it because it's to help us in a certain time period of this life and God's providence, So it's still very important for these times. And like you were saying, I find personally for me, it's the one thing I could never get rid of, even when I was in the ups and downs that we might talk about later in the mental health part. But the one thing that never left me, although I kind of had enough of the church and everything for a while after seminary, was the fact that the signs of the times were more obvious than ever before. I've been aware of Medjugorje, Garabandal, Fatima. I mean, I've known Fatima since I was a little boy, Lourdes as well. And I knew of Garabandal like 15 years ago at least, Medjugorje just a little longer. And when you start seeing now that you couldn't have seen any time in that period, it's very, very obvious indeed. And it's not just things in the church, it's this parallel of what's crumbling in the church is also crumbling in society. You can see that parallel. I keep repeating that, and hopefully people are catching on to what I mean. But what about, because you are covering quite a few topics right now, maybe if we could take it a bit at a time. I mean, because we can see a lot now, like the dominoes are ready to go with the banking system. You did a video as well about the different theology topic in terms of the new mass. Where's your head been the past week with these videos? Because you have been quite busy, haven't you?
Yeah, like I suppose we see. I mean, everyone will remember the 2008 banking crisis, and the financial system is the primary mode of controlling the world, controlling society. Money controls people. It simply does. And if you were, if anything we touch on this topic, it's definitely going to cause a lot of consternation, among people. And now we see this, oh, nothing's happening. We've got the banks are solid and so on and so forth. And then the Fed is stepping in because the American banks are failing. It's not just the Silicon Valley Bank. There's two or three others now that are in deep water. And, the Fed has just stepped in today and he said, look, we're going to do whatever it takes to save these banks. So, the Fed starts getting the money printing machines rolling again. Look, we'll if we need money, we'll just print it, quantitative easing. And Switzerland did the same thing, although Switzerland did burn bondholders, 17 billion. No big deal, It's not like people had their pensions invested in this and stuff like that. I mean, it'll take a few weeks now for all of this to trickle out, but there's definitely something afoot, and we'll see where this heads. I mean, if you think about it, we're on the cusp of more job losses, more instability. We have, in the same day, at this moment in time, we have the Chinese premier in Russia. We have the Japanese premier in Ukraine. If they're not there at the same time, the Japanese premier is definitely, no, he is. They were both. So you had the Chinese premier in Russia, you have the Japanese premier in Ukraine. You really have one side of the world confronting the other. You have because let's face it, nobody goes to Russia and calls Putin my dear friend. I mean, it's definitely not calling him what the West is calling him, a dictator and all this. And you can just observe what's going on. You have the West against Russia, against South Africa, which is also allied, because South Africa allied itself with China and Russia in military operations. So you have the West against these nations, and the Arab world. A lot of them don't seem to be cozying up to the West. They seem to be more, you saw Saudi Arabia and Iran getting closer together. These were arch enemies in the past, and now they're starting to do deals together. They're starting to talk. So it looks like we are really shaping up for, the different alliances are forming at this moment in time. And we would be naive to think, on the day where Putin himself starts using the word nuclear, because Britain wants to send what was it, uranium enriched tanker, something, some type of a military equipment that can pierce tanks. So and Putin says, if you do this, I'm putting nuclear weapons back on the table, or he's, the threats are there. And if you're going to back Putin into a foxhole, he's going to bite. This is simply going to happen. And I think we're on a cliff edge here at this moment in time, and we'll see where it's going to head. And I think people need to pray more. I do think it's a strange moment in the history of the world, what we're seeing, and we can't forget that Our Lady did prophesize this. She did mention this. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. And I think any small crisis in the world could escalate very quickly. A collapse in the banking system. You just don't know how that'll ripple out. But it could, central banks could step in and contain it if they want to do that. But it's unlike 2008, we're in this moment of increased lending rates. So I don't understand their economics and how they're going to square this all out. It seems like they want some type of crisis to develop. I don't know if this is deflection or something.
I think so.
Yeah.
No, before I forget, when you're speaking there, the two things that's coming to mind is when I did the short video on the live stream at the weekend, I highlighted Rishi Sunak speaking about central-backed digital currency. And also one of the videos I've noticed that's really sprouting right now in the last few days is the one about the alert system that's due to come in April. They've even given us a date now, apparently. Now, I haven't been watching TV for the last few weeks, but someone sent me a little 1 minute short about someone highlighting it all. And then I was like, oh, that must be why I'm getting this rocket in views, because it's now went on national TV on the news channels. People are Googling it or YouTubing it, and they're finding my video on it.
Okay.
So, but it's in case of threat to life, extreme weathers, for example, or something else. And I'm like you say, the Chinese president's in meeting Putin. You've got the Japanese president who's great friends with Biden going to Ukraine just after Biden has been. They put out an international arrest warrant on Putin. He's getting more isolated for the West, and he better hope that there's something real there with China. Otherwise, he's going to be on his own, and whatever that can mean with Russia.
Yeah.
Now, when you're talking to me and bringing in the prophecies and that Catholic prophecies about it, I just think the fact that this alert system's got nothing to do with weather, especially when we're in the official time of spring, coming into summer, and everything else. But it might just be the case in nuclear Armageddon. Get yourself to some shelter for whatever.
Exactly.
Minutes.
Exactly.
Come on, please.
Yeah.
So condescending to us.
I
We're
know.
human beings with brains.
Oh,
The other thing that's coming to my mind, though, it goes back to Garabandal. What's it going to take for the Pope to get to Moscow?
he's
Because
got. Yeah. Well, okay. I've got news on that. He,
Oh,
yeah, you didn't hear this. Oh, I got something you didn't hear about.
oh, I'm not watching the news. Anything else?
Oh, this is Catholic news. You should know this.
Oh, oh dear.
The Pope is going to Hungary.
I think I may have heard this quite a little bit.
Yeah, so the Pope is going to Hungary, and Hungary is kind of this strange European country, which is, kind of kept itself at arm's length from both sides. So we have, Orban, Viktor Orban, which is, you know, not pro-Russia, but not rabidly anti-Russia either. They're heavily dependent on Russian oil because the refineries were built during Soviet era and are not able to refine oil from other countries as easily. This is some of the technical problems with the energy market in Europe when you're saying, oh, we're going to stop buying Russian oil. Well, that's okay, but do you have the capabilities to refine a different grade of oil? So Hungary was trying to import oil from Croatia and other locations, but I think in the background, what is happening at this moment in time is that you have Hungary trying to broker some type of behind the scenes communication, and the Pope going to Hungary is highly significant. And it wouldn't surprise me in the background if when the Pope goes to Hungary, if he doesn't just do, oh, let's do a detour up to Moscow for a second and see what you never know. You really
That's
you
true,
really
but I mean, I know Glenn Hudson I've had on the show. It needs to be Moscow. Even if he goes to St. Petersburg or he goes anywhere, it needs to
yeah
be Moscow. That's the prophecy. That's what
yeah
Peter said. So,
yeah
but no, for me, I think, like I was saying, with the isolation of Putin now, I mean, he's an international fugitive, basically.
yeah
But at the same time, he's doing trips to Crimea and then he's meeting the Chinese premier. No one's in a rush to arrest him, you know what I mean? But
no
at the same time, they put one out for him. They retracted one from some other world leader. Was it in Iraq or somewhere Iran? So I need to look it up because I was thinking about doing a video on it. It's like they're just moving chess pieces. Who's got one
yeah
or who hasn't? It's all the
yeah
nonsense.
yeah
It's as if the irrational side of the Western ways just there and they just keep edging it on for a fight. And
yeah
China's trying to broker a peace treaty. It's the West that's saying no. So
yeah
we need to see what's going on there. But the isolation of Putin, the fact it's going to get to a point where it's building up and building up. There's another channel I was watching where he says he's finding information that 300,000 NATO troops are getting pushed to the border with everything else. Even today, I was speaking to my physio about it all because he's Polish and I was trying to get his perspective on it, and he was just over there visiting family. He says the airport is landing into a civilian airport. They have anti-missile defense systems and everything off the
yeah
airport grounds because it's so close to the border.
yeah
He's seen the SAMs moving back and forth and everything, the rocket launchers, the lot. So he's seen all this in Poland just last week, the
yeah
week before. And
yeah
he can see the build up with a lot of things as well. So there's a lot happening where I try in my own channel not to focus too much on that. I'm trying to keep the Catholic faith stuff like yourself. But if people in the Catholic Church aren't aware of this and they're too busy trying to debate what's accepted, what's not accepted by the church, rather than having just an open mind and an open heart to see the clear signs of the times,
yeah
they'll realize quickly why the content serves a purpose right now, because there's going to be great confusion. Remember, the tribulation comes before the warning, which comes before the miracle. The tribulation first, and Padre Pio himself says to the Garabandal visionaries, or whoever he says it to him, it may have been in the letter, but it's definitely him who said that the blood of the martyrs of Europe will pay for the great miracle.
wow
So
wow
the tribulation, and that's not, I mean, to me, that's why we're getting prepared all this time with the messages repeating themselves. We're to get founded in the faith to the point where we'll gladly take it like the apostles did after Pentecost.
mm.
Before, they're hiding in fear. After Pentecost, they're going for it and they're giving all praise to God while they're getting whipped and martyred and everything else. That fundamental life of the Holy Spirit living by divine will, that is what's been getting infused in those who are being taken on board every single day through prayer, fasting, penance, reading scriptures, understanding the faith, learning the faith, confessions, Eucharist, all of it. And that's where we're getting towards to the point where we're the ones that are all for God, and if we're the ones still here after it, it's the case of like we're the ones rebuilding through
Yeah.
evangelizing. And maybe sometimes, without digressing too much on it, is the fact that this will all serve a purpose, hopefully, when people
Mhm.
want to figure out what's just happened, why has this happened, what have we to do now.
Mm.
Well, I think there's every chance where when it's the West against Russia and the way it is, and an international fugitive as president and all the rest of it, I mean, it might be someone that comes after him. It's even worse. You never know. Sometimes
Yeah.
better the devil, you don't know.
Mm.
But for whatever reason, the man in white, the peace envoy, the Pope, he's the one then that's going to go. And
Yeah.
for what I remember reading is things will seem to have calmed down like it was a worthwhile visit. But shortly after the Pope's return from Moscow, hostilities break out everywhere again, and then that's when we're on. So that's a clear sign a lot of people from the Garabandal perspective are waiting for now. Because you're seeing everything else in place, the Great Synod,
Mhm.
communism returning, and then the Pope's trip to Moscow. Your 15-minute cities, your all this stuff that's happening now. You can see communism more and more. And I tell you what, I've never seen such quick haste after the recent World Economic Forum to get things implemented.
Yeah.
It's happening so quick now. You're almost needing to run to catch up with it when you're looking at sources all the time. That's what I'm noticing as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening at this carbon decarbonization of the world. That's speeding up like unprecedented. Um, and just on Ukraine, it's interesting when on some of that stuff. My wife's family originally came from there, from Lvov, before they moved to Poland. And so last year, when war broke out, my wife went over with a few trucks of aid from Ireland to help them. And there was a massive buildup of American troops in Poland. And you're talking about a guy flying into an airport beside the border. Well, it's probably Rzeszów, if I'm not mistaken, or some other airport like that. And yeah, there's a massive people around there were told to be careful, because any of these airports, they could be targeted if Putin wants to target NATO locations. Some of these strategic places could be targeted. So we'll see where it all plans out, but it does seem like all the chess pieces are definitely in play at this moment in time. And we'd be foolish not to heed and not to pray. And especially those that are anti-Francis, for whatever reason, God placed him in the chair of Peter for these times, and we will see it in the future. But he's got a very difficult task on his plate at this moment of time, to try and steer the church through, what could be the biggest changing event that happened in the last 2,000 years, if we're to believe what's coming.
Yeah.
What was coming will mark the end of an era and the beginning of a new era. What type of era, what type of tribulation this will be, who knows? But
Well, they say the blood of the martyrs are the seed for the church's growth.
yeah.
So again, with Padre Pio's quote about the tribulation and the European martyrs paying for the miracle, we are entering into that era of peace that she promised in Fatima. So that's where the hope needs to come in. I know we're speaking about maybe the scarier stuff right now.
Mm.
What happens if you're going to die and meet your maker tonight?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if a nuclear war comes or if you die in your sleep or whatever. The fact is, are you ready for eternity?
Yeah, absolutely.
Some nights I'm like, go for it, Lord, if you want. And other nights I'm like, oh, please not tonight. I need to get to confession. It's the way we are, aren't we? It's just we're human
Yeah.
at the end of the day. But that's where I want to focus as well on try to balance this criteria for the one channel, because see when you get into like the Jeff Cavins Bible timeline, the Scott Hands, the Bibles, you ever hear these guys picking up this social media trend of all the bad stuff in the church and world?
Yeah.
They're just focusing on,
Yeah.
like you say, and that's where I want to bring a balance in, because it's too easy to keep looking at YouTube, looking at this one, looking at that one, and half the time it's never good stuff. And it's very easy to fall into that trap. I don't know about you, but sometimes I
Yeah.
find myself wanting to pull it back before I do this or that on a video.
Yeah.
And see when you just get into the beauty and the treasure of the faith,
Yeah.
The joy is unmatched when it
Yeah.
comes to anything else that we're digesting through our brains.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Well,
Um, yeah, on you go.
no, I suppose, and this is where all of this is to prepare us so that we're not afraid. You know, St. John Paul II, do not be afraid. Do not be. He said it so many times, and people shouldn't be apprehensive. Just, you know, be prepared, but not be afraid. And as you said, look, sure, who knows what tomorrow could bring? And if, for thousands, every day is their last day on this earth, you know, and the faith should be something that gives us joy, hope, and peace, and help us to affront what's coming if it's coming.
Well, it reminds me actually, I was speaking to Dom Cyril and the Carthusians at Parkminster years ago when I did the week there. It's a week I'll never forget. It was
Mm.
amazing. I mean, I've done different come and sees at different communities and whatever, but the Carthusians were at another level. They're the only order in the entire church that have never needed a reform.
Wow.
Forget the Latin, but it's like never reformed because never deformed.
Wow.
And you just know you're in the company of mystics. But this guy had a very similar story like St. Ignatius. He got his leg damaged in an accident in the hospital. He was reading a book in Thomas Merton. One thing led to another. And then he's a Carthusian 50 years later. And here I am talking to him. A very wise man. And I think at the time, you know, that young age and the faith comes in, you start really thinking the reality of life and death. And I says, you ever afraid of dying? Are you afraid of death? Because obviously he's like 80s or something now. He says, oh, there's an old monastic tradition that I did. It took me 2 years, but no, no longer afraid. And I was like, what was the tradition? He says, every day I tell myself I'm going to die. Today I am dying. Today I could die. And that is the mantra. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a happy, jolly day for you. He
Yeah.
says it took him 2 years of doing that every day to realize there wasn't even a split second moment of thinking of one day I'm going to die and the
Yeah.
fear around it. It was dispelled after 2 years of doing that. And I'm like,
Good.
and I remembered it ever since because I
Yeah.
was probably about 20, 21 at the time, you know, and I remember him saying that every day. That was what the old desert fathers, the church fathers, and this monasticism, this is what he done, you know. But I don't know what to take from that is the fact that is like, we don't need to be worried, and especially watching the news. I feel so much better turning off the TV these last few weeks. I feel more productive in the evenings after work. I feel energized to do things. I've got a clear focus and everything. And away from all the daily negativity is just the best thing ever. And that's what I would encourage our viewers to do. But that actually might be a good point to bring in about the mental health stuff, I'm
Mm.
thinking, because again, we are what we eat, we are what we
Mhm.
digest, and here
Yeah.
especially. And for me, I think I've just scratched the surface there with saying the difference of what I'm putting into my brain, into my attention, what I'm thinking over, and things like that.
Yeah.
But do you want to come in there with a bit, or you want me to do more?
No, I suppose on the mental health side, because so many people watch our videos. I know this because people will email me or reach out to me or comment and stuff. I suppose, especially on male mental health. I mean, there's been campaigns for years on this, on Samaritans, and ring this helpline and talk it out, ring that and talk it out. And I suppose we do have to bring it down to a real human level. Like, people need to, men need to talk out. They need to, sit, talk stuff out, not feel they're judged. Because a lot of people are afraid, I'm afraid I'll say this, that what will people think of me, or will they judge me, or how they will view me, and stuff like this. And, you know, at the end of the day, Christ left his church behind, so to heal those, or to bring those that are in darkness. I mean, the gospel is bringing light into people's lives. Christ, he ate with and he helped and he forgave a class of people that um the religious rulers of the day didn't really interact with. And if we look around today, who are the lepers that Christ would be going out to? We don't physically have lepers where their fingers have been, rotten away and their noses are missing, you know, these people that are suffering that type of especially in Europe. In some countries they do, but in general leprosy isn't an issue that we deal with in society. But we do have lepers, a certain sector of people that, you know, and generally speaking, no, I'm not talking to them because they're this, they're that, and the other. And that impacts their mental health, how they're perceived to be judged, how they're perceived to be treated, in many areas of society. And it's really, really important as Catholics and as Catholic men that we're there to be able to just talk to people, to say, okay, you're going through a situation, you're going through a problem, you can work this out, and to bring them along that path of hope, of conversion. You say, look, you know, we're all made from the same cloth, and Christ is here as this ideal that is there to help us, that is there to give grace, that is there to give hope, because he's a real living God in our church, and like his presence is actually real. It's palpable, it's living. And you know, if we bring people into contact with him, he does so much work. But it's opening doors to grace that we need to do. And you can focus on self-help programs and discussion programs and stuff like this, but like, I think the greatest healer is Christ. And when you bring, especially adoration and the Eucharist, when you bring adoration, Eucharist, the sacraments into people's lives, it transforms. It literally does. It just, I mean, there's no other way to say it. So I just wanted to give that message out there. You know, Christ is reaching out to modern day lepers, you know, those people that maybe in our church or in our society we just don't talk to, we just can't handle, we don't understand them. You're infected with something and we don't want to get involved with you because you might infect us with whatever you're doing. And Christ is there. Look, I'm there to heal those that are hurting. Now that's what he is. He's there to heal. We just have to bring his healing grace into the church and into society, and be there to talk without judging people. You know, just listen to them, listen to their issues, to their problems, to their hurts, and so forth. And I just think it's really important, because we can talk about traditional Latin Mass, we can talk about the faith, we can talk about theology, we can talk about so many things, but you know, there are hundreds of people on my island and the island of Ireland, hundreds of men every year, 500, more than one a day. And where I live in my town, there's been 3 that I know this year so far, 3 men that have taken their lives. So, you know, there are people literally walking around in darkness. How can we get in there, shine a light, say, look, you don't need to live in this internal destruction that in your mind, that there's nothing to hope for. You need to go and jump off a bridge because your life is so your suffering is so dark and so forth. You know, we're here to give an alternative to that. So and that's where I really want mental health, the mental health discussion to go. I think and the reality is all men suffer from this at some stage in their life, at some points in life. I mean, you have to be extremely blessed never to have any issues in this area. I mean, it's certainly something that I'm extremely familiar with, you know, intimately familiar with all of my life. And I suppose I'm fine talking about it, but people need to hear it and know, look, you don't need to live in that. You simply don't. You know, that's the reality. But anyway, that's just my thought, you know. And I think you know, modern day lepers, wherever we put into that category, you know, we have to remember we will not get to heaven as Catholics if we don't bring those that we consider, you know, that section of community or that section of society that we don't want to engage with. Those are the people that Christ wants to reach, and that's our path to sanctification. That's our path to heaven. You know, our path to heaven is not something that we work on ourselves and we go straight up. We have to love Christ in the other, and you know, love the presence in the other to be able to sanctify ourselves and you know, and to know Christ more. I mean, that's my meditation and thought.
No, quite right. It reminds me straight away of what Mother Teresa always says: "You did it to me."
Yeah.
You know, feeding the hungry, taking care of the homeless, visit them in prison. I mean, everything that's in the gospel, he told us what to do. And it's
Yeah.
those who do the will of the Father that enter the kingdom, as my spiritual director keeps telling me. Not the ones shouting, Lord, Lord, it's the ones who did the will of my Father. And it goes back to those examples. And the only thing, I mean, I'm quite an open book about it. I mean, maybe in another discussion, another video of mine, even I could even do more about that, because sometimes I do see the comments in that and it's asking for prayers, and I mean, you
Mm.
feel kind of well that people maybe be looking to you as if I've got something special. I'm far from special in any way, shape, or form, let me tell you.
Yeah.
As even seen my wife, actually, I've only been married a few months, even her journey sometimes with bereavement and mental health and everything else. I would say she's a lot stronger than me in many ways inside, and looking back in my own journey at times where you maybe think like, come on, toughen up, my man. But
Yeah.
that masculinity can be misinterpreted to what it would mean. And I think right now in the past year of first of all ever given a bit of focus to Saint Joseph, you see
Mm.
the silent Saint Joseph, the protector, the silent Saint Joseph, the father, the husband, the silent Saint Joseph that get up and done God's will,
Yeah.
but you never hear of anything in the gospel of him. So there's something I'm discovering spiritually in a way, that being used to Saint Joseph, getting not used to him and coming in as a husband now, and maybe one day, please God the Father. There's a sense you want to stick to him. So that's where I'm at just now. But I would say, and for me, there might have been times of low, but always up and down. But never. I think when we're younger, we're quite resilient. We're more resilient than when we are getting into our adulthood.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the older I've got, the more easier it came to manifest. Like depression or anxiety. I never knew what anxiety was until seminary.
Yeah.
And the only way I can look to describe what was the constant stress of overthinking, of worrying about the next thing or next thing to do, or what's happened here, how's that going to be tomorrow, the day after, what's going to be said. The constant thinking and overthinking the way the place made you be
Yeah.
just led to gluttony, of eating more, of drinking more, and even going to the philosophy class in ethics. It's even discussed by Aristotle about the texture of the food, about the fact that it's a momentarily feeling of, it's just good. But really, once it's done, you just feel terrible. And then it clicked for me. That's why gluttony is called a deadly sin, because the love of God's not telling you that you're going to go to hell because you're eating all this and drinking all this. It's the fact that his love is telling you, look how you're feeling after it. It's
Yeah.
not going to suffice in that moment.
Yeah.
That pleasure is gone instantly once you're left with it, and the cycle continues. And the focus is give it to him. Because why are you taking that extra bit of food? Why do you need that extra drink? It's because you're trying. Why are you watching things? What is it is you're trying to escape from? What is it you're trying to fill? And all this stuff just it's fleeting. It just passes. And that's when I was in Medjugorje. I think it was at 2017, 2018, and I was at rock bottom at this point after seminary and stuff. And even a couple of years passing, nothing seems to be changing. It's just a sense of darkness and everything. And I think I opened up the gospel at John 15, it was, and it's just saying, cut off from me like the vine, cut off,
Mhm.
dying wither, you cut off from me, it's death.
Yeah.
And it hurt me so much in the moment that I knew from experience it's true. And I think Pope Francis says that recently, actually. It's when you're at rock bottom, God picks you up.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might need to get there in order to have that experience, because when you're picked up by God and you've seen the difference with Him and without Him, it's better being with Him. That's how it found to me at the beginning. Not big, miraculous, overcoming thing. I just balanced it out logically and to say it's better with Him than without. Even
Yeah.
when I'm angry at the church and angry at seminary and all the other stuff, I turned away from it. I'd done the drinking, I'd done the gluttony, I'd done away from church and all that. And then I went to a retreat, felt better. Then I fell away again. Then I went to the monks, and a week later I fell away again. But I know when I'm there and doing the good things, there's peace, there's calm, there's even a wee bit of joy sprouting somewhere.
Yeah.
And I know it's better with him than without him.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had to go and see about it eventually because I knew I needed help. And as a man, there was even a sense of shame that I had to go and talk about it. But for the first time in a few years, to hear it bounce back in a better way,
Yeah.
it broke the ice, you know. So the shame quickly went away. Even though I kept it secret, the shame still went away. But it was good just to hear something else fed into me that wasn't just me.
Yeah.
Another big enlightenment thing, if we put it in a spiritual sense, not to freak anyone out, but for me, Father Chad Ripperger, a priest, speaking about the demonic influence and speaking about the fact they know how to twist your thoughts and all. See, when you get someone that's got experience in academia behind them the way he has, I found this completely enlightenment for him. I was even falling asleep listening to him talk about that stuff. It didn't bother me at all. I just was hungry for the truth.
Yeah.
You know, and at the end of the day, it's the truth that sets us free. And what is truth?
Yeah.
Just Pilate asked Jesus to his face,
Yeah.
staring right at you.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
I'd leave it there for. I mean, I could get more and more, but I'm quite a raw. I've been told I'm quite raw with the
Yeah.
truth,
Yeah.
and I think sometimes that's the way. Yeah, there's too much pussyfooting about stuff these days. Like just basic testimony or give it real. And if people want, sometimes a bit of tough love's needed as well.
Yeah.
But we need to get away from our own minds if it's keeping us down and trodden and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and I'll always find I mean, you want to be courage as a man, and this is the one thing you can't do. Think of it
Yeah.
as a courageous thing and speak. Go to the doctor, go to a trusted friend and just say, this is where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
There's
remember one
actually,
story, if I can finish that one story. I don't know who it was, but I've never, again, I remember stories, I remember books, I never remember authors or who told me. But it was the man was walking across the road. He was walking away down the street one morning, and the priest was at the other side, and they were crossing. And there's just a lot of smiles. I have to say good morning, the only person in the street. And it was a day or two later, the priest gets a knock on the door. And the man says, can I speak to you for a minute? He says, yeah. He says, I was on my way the other morning to kill myself and you
wow.
saved me. And the priest
Wow.
said, I said, what do you mean? He says, you just gave me a smile. He says, and there's something that was in you that I knew wasn't in me. And that smile just snapped me out of it. A smile saved him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just remember that a smile is all you might need to give to someone, a little bit of acknowledgement. Because even in one of the big cities over in here in England, it's amazing how people pass each other and don't even look at each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a smile, good
Yeah.
morning,
Yeah. I
that
mean,
would save that man.
it's amazing when you're talking about I did a program. It's by a Protestant. It's called Power to Choose, and it's like the 12-step programs. You have to do it in a group. So we did it. I did it with a group of people, and I just thought it was just powerful. It does open your mind up. It makes you think, and it's based on scripture, even though it's I think you can distinguish between the Protestant elements, but mostly it does work. It's leading you. It's trying to bring you out, to talk you out of your stuff, and it definitely did help me. But that thing sometimes we say, oh, look, I can't change anything, I can't do this. But just being out there and talking about it, you'll drive a conversation in somebody else's mind, because at the end of the day, you don't need to suffer. This is the message we need to get to men. You do not need to suffer in your own mind, threading wheels, letting you need to get it out, talk in a group. And the great thing about doing this program is you share. Nobody's judging you, and if you need advice, there's always somebody there to bounce stuff off to okay, how to manage this program. And what I found doing this is other people that were there, they had a wealth of knowledge. So they said, did you read this book? Or I read this book. And they're sharing books about, it's delving into different topics, how to deal with resentment. So some people carry around. Oh, it's actually, there was a brilliant quote I got yesterday. It was just absolutely, I have to quote it. Like let me bring up it just was so powerful. Yeah. Let's see. We are dependent on the people we hate as on those we love in a disproportionate manner. When we foster resentment towards someone, we can't stop thinking about them. We are filled with negative feelings that absorb a large part of our energy. And so there is an investment in a relationship that does not leave us available psychologically and spiritually. So I have to get we were just discussing this topic because a lot of our spiritual growth, like if you've got resentment because you were abused, if you've got resentment because for whatever reason something has happened in your life and you deeply resent it, and every day you wake up you think about maybe they inflicted pain on your family member or some traumatic event. And I remember walking on the Camino and I met this Italian guy, and he had been in a car crash. He was on a motorbike and had been in a car crash, and which had left him, terribly handicapped and for about a year. He was in hospital for a full year trying to get through rehab, and when he got out, like half his body was kind of half paralyzed, slightly paralyzed, but he could still walk, he could still use his hands. So when I met him, I couldn't see the handicap. He because he kind of masked it. But when I went to shake hands with him, one of his hand was very very, very weak. Anyway, he told me about this, and I said, well, what would you do if you met the guy that caused this accident? Because the guy caused the accident and ran off. And he didn't even know who this guy was. And there was such anger in him, and there was such hatred in for what this guy did. And I just said, look, you have to forgive him because you're reliving that accident every single day. And he started crying. And he understood, like, you need to let go, you need to forgive, you need to forget, and you not forget, but you need to forgive and let go of that person that is living in your mind, because he was living with that trauma every day. And I suppose in this Power to Jews, this kind of process, it kind of delves into this a little bit more. And it's good if you can get together every week with a group of 20 people, or if you can, or more, and just to talk out these specific things so that you can better manage what's coming at you. Like, because a lot of men will reach out to me or advice, I'm suffering from this, Robert, or I'm suffering from that. And you can take the problem and just say, let's look at this from exteriors, so take the problem out of your life, put it over and to the side, and let's objectively look at what's going on there. And let's analyze and let's get you help, and let's so that you can confront it. But a lot of the trauma that people are suffering, it's, you need to take it out of your mind, bring it into the open. And this is where Christ is amazing, because, he says, I am the light, and he shines light on it. And when you shine light on it, you make it small, you make the big shadow disappear. And, that's, I just think there's so much we could be doing in the church to shine light in people's lives. I think as long as people are killing themselves in Ireland, we're failing as a Catholic Church. We're utterly failing people, because we're not giving them the healing and the light that we can do that by just being witnesses. I mean, because oftentimes I feel so dejected, and I just say, I'm not doing anything. I'm, this isn't working. This is all ego on YouTube, and it's kind of something's coming at me, and then somebody will ring me up. No, this video helped me, or that video helped me. I said, okay, look, I'll keep going, and I suppose that conversation does work. It definitely does work. So, like, that's just my own experience of as one of the issues that people suffer with, which is resentment. Because when you have resentment, you have these people are dependent in your life, in your mind. You've created a relationship there, even though you don't even see them every day, you're not thinking about them, they're there. These people are just there in your life. You think about them, and it's not healthy, and you never grow spiritually if you do that.
I think a lot of what you're saying there, I can see my own journey as well. And I think that's where the community first helped out, because I was going up there to pray and praise and live like Padre Pio.
Yeah.
in the mountains. You know, I was going to do all these wonderful things and get holy. And then for
Yeah.
2 months, I was up there. I was as high as the sky, and all for Jesus. You know, and the retreats and all the spiritual nourishment, the knowledge, the themes, everything about it was great. And the joy that was over me since this real experience and real life conversion, you would say, from practicing to living the faith to its personal, intimate. This was wow. And then after 2 months, going to bed every night, so happy as I woke up. And you know, Lord, you can take me if you want, because this is it. Says it. And one morning, out of nowhere, with that same thing for a good couple of months every day, I woke up in a terrible foul mood for no reason whatsoever.
Yes.
I remember sitting in the dining room and it was one of the girls I was saying, I said, I don't know why. She went, finally. And I, what do you mean? She says, God's getting to work. And
Yes.
again, it's the experience that she already had from community and was the experience for those before her, you know. And that's what it is. God wants into those roots that have been planted, the seeds that were planted that were not from Him, the wounded emotions, going back to childhood especially. I've done a bit of psychology at the different unis over the years, but I would say the best psychological experience personally and educationally, if you could call it, is through the experience of community life with all people from every country and background who had their own issues and all the rest of it. Human nature's human nature. It's the same advice of forgiveness. It's the same advice of trauma. It's the same. We're human. You're
Yeah.
not this is the thing. You're not different to the point where you're going through something that's unique to you. You're going through the same trauma, the same mentalities, the same problems, the same holding ons, and all the everything else, just like anybody else. We've all had it to one way or another. And you're not the only person who've had anxiety, you're not the only person that's been abused physically, mentally. And it's the same what I find is the fact that it's the holding on. It's the holding on all the time. And like you says, I found it difficult because eventually this thing was coming to the surface in me. They're saying, "Are you acting like because of your wounded emotion? You're doing this because of past hurts." And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But eventually things start to click. I start to understand what they're saying, the experience of it. And one thing before I forget, I used to go to the spiritual director every week for confession and would chat as well, or every 2 weeks, I think it was. And this point, maybe I'm 8, 9 months into my year, and they would always do the confession and then we'd have spiritual direction and they would be doing healing of wounded emotions. So he'd say, let's pray. And he would pray openly and freely and asking God to come in and be sitting there with my eyes closed and whatever. And whatever memory might have popped up. And he says, if there's something there, just say it. And I just say, no matter how small it was, I would just say it this time at school or this time with this one or whatever. And tell me about it, speak it out. And he says, and do you choose to forgive them?
Mm.
And and I says yes. I take a moment to think of it, feel the emotions in that, and say, you know what, I want to forgive. And I done it. And it says prayer and the blessing, and that was it.
Yeah.
After doing that for 9 months, one day, like any other time, after 9 months of doing this, we do it all again, right? What memory comes up? And a particular memory come up with some friends at high school that I completely forgot all about. And it's what they were saying to me, what they were slagging me off, and all the rest of it. And I won't get any context, but there's something there. And I told him this one. He says, do you choose to forgive? And it took me a bit longer because this really came to the surface and I never realized it was there. And he says, remember, forgiveness is an act of will. You don't have to feel it.
Yeah.
It's an act of your free will. Just choose to forgive.
Yeah.
God will do the rest. You might not feel that you want to forgive, but just choose to forgive. So is it right? I choose to forgive. And I took a moment, and then I says it right. I choose to forgive. And he'd done the prayer as always. But see, this one particular time, unlike any other, and I'd done many, many with him, this felt like that sensation. I feel like it was whoa. And I went back in my seat like this. It was in the stomach, like a sense of freedom, like going down the hill fast.
Yeah.
It's okay, it's okay. He says that was a good one.
Yeah.
That was a real one. And I don't know what it was, but I mean, I knew it was lifted. I gave it to God and he done his prayer and it went. So
Yeah.
sometimes there is something spiritual involved. Sometimes there is something rooted in there that it's coming at the surface. And I would say to people, find a good priest, find a good spiritual director. If there's any ways of that type of community fellowship, and see what comes with it. Because God will use people in your life to bring things up. And as the leader always says, it's like stones rubbing together with other people until you're a polished diamond.
Yeah.
Hard. It is hard, but you know what? God the Father toughens up his children. And that's one thing I've learned. I look back to where in my weaknesses and where I was weak and flimsy and whatever else, people pleasing and all that stuff, to the point where I know I'm a man now.
Mm.
And God the Father has played the most principal and most vital role of that through
Yeah.
hard times.
Yeah.
Oh, and I don't know where people's traumas are and where they are, but when the number one killer in Ireland and the UK for many years, even well before the pandemic, the number one killer among men was still suicide. Something
Un,
is very
un,
wrong.
Under 60, it is.
Yeah,
I think
something is very wrong.
car accidents, and so I mean it's crazy. I mean, and it doesn't have to happen. This is the sad thing. Whatever perceived problem is in your mind, and you hit the nail on the head. It's community, you know, is to take yourself out and to talk it out in an atmosphere where you're not judged. You know, you just say it, and that's it. So you take the problem. What you need to do is you need to take your problem, to put it to one side, and say, okay, you have this, and put a plan to deal with it. Put a plan. Okay, how this is the plan to deal with that thing that is destroying your life, and it can be done. It can be worked on. I
Mm.
suppose some people think, oh, it has to happen in a day or a year. Our Lord worked for 3 years with his disciples, and even after 3 years, they didn't capture everything. It's a process. Peter denied Christ after 3 years, so like, it really is a process, and that's what it needs to be. It needs to be spoken out. And now community. The only thing is I can say with people going into community is to find a community with people with people that want to help you, that are disinterested in because there are sadly some communities where you can just have a weirdo founder that it's all about ego, it's all about him and stuff like this. I do think the Chinaculo style communities do work. Something like this, that is looking to give disinterested help, that's not looking to use you or further abuse you, because this is the sad reality in some places. You go looking for help and you come out worse than you went in. And I'm thinking specifically about the Legionaries of Christ, because that trauma, a lot of guys went in there with well-intentioned but came out really, really hurt. And so I do think the church, if it's going to offer this help of community help, that it has to be well governed, extremely well governed, with oversight and audit, so that you're bringing people to a better state, and you're not using them, or they're not going to be further abused. Because sometimes people come in with trauma, and sadly that trauma can be abused. We saw this with Rupnik. He was, the stuff that he was doing. We saw this with Jean Varney,
John Vanier.
yeah, it's, and people looked up to this guy as some type of mystic and God knows what. And at the end of the day, we found out, he was there working with another priest. So there has to be oversight, there has to be accountability, there has to be transparency, but there has to be confidentiality as well. So it's a hard formula to get right when it comes to doing it. But when it's done right, it's powerful at healing.
Yeah.
It really does.
I think one of the things that helped me as well was the camaraderie amongst
Yeah,
men.
yeah,
I mean, just joining the prayer group of the Men of St. Joseph over Zoom during the lockdowns, that was the first beginnings of a few things for me coming back. And to have like-minded guys just there with the faith, just saying a few prayers, reading a scripture passage, and just having nice guys getting on with. It was just good to get You know, there was no alter egos, there was no slaggings, there was no idiots. It was just good guys with a clear common focus of the faith.
Yeah,
Which,
I mean, I think that's kind of the future, and that's where, you know, I think what I'm seeing in the church, there's some really really well formed laymen. Guy, I'm just thinking, you know, that these are guys that have taken serious study for a number of years. They understand themselves, and they're able to give advice extremely, you know, they're really able to give advice. And I think that type of lay community, even though you're not physically living in a building or so, but as long as you can come together a few times a year, or you're there to talk things out in a group, is going to help men. But it's trying to you know, open that up in the church is not going to be easy. But if you're going to do that, you have to be open to everybody, and you can't be there judging if somebody comes in there that, you know, they're living in a different way than we would agree with, but they're looking for something. You have to be there to listen to them and say, okay, you're doing this, or you're doing this, and, you know, I'm not judging you, I'm just listening to you. What do you want to do? What are you searching for? And you have to be able to then present them the faith as this spiritual path that, you know, that is going to help them in their lives, and to bring them into that mystery of encountering Christ. You know, I'd like to you know, present the truth to them, you know, present them the truth that this is something that is beautiful, and this may help your life, and to bring it in and to talk it out. But it's important to get men talking in that sense, and to stop them building up these big problems in their minds that once you talk it out, it's really not that big, guy. You know, everybody's made from the same cloth. Every man is going to face. You can list 10 things out, and I can guarantee you, a lot of men have experienced some of them or all of them. And, you know, you just talk it out and you move on, and you develop yourself spiritually, and it does work. It just does work. I can just say that.
yeah.
And but when I organized the adoration in Derry, and it wasn't just me that organized it, it was like really the Cursillo movement. Two men came up, two men approached me, one on the day and another one afterwards, and said that they decided not to kill themselves because there was so much promotion going on in Derry. I think some of the videos were getting 40 to 50,000. They had it on the radio. I mean, everybody knew about it in Derry, and it went all over Ireland. And two men decided, well, okay, Robert has put so much promotion into this. What does Robert have that he's talking about? And two men didn't commit suicide because of that. And I think, and that kind of struck me, and I said, well, what did I do? I didn't do anything. Like, I really didn't do anything. I organized, we put adoration on in the church for 3 hours. We had a few talks. We didn't do anything. We would just say, we're here, you know, just talk it out. And I firmly believe, um, if we did more of that, if we got people talking in the church, and it has to be talking without judging them. This is very important. We can't just pick and choose who we want to talk to if we're going to offer this type of help. You know, we talk to them, irrespective of who they are, or how they label themselves, or what they've been to. You have to talk to them, because we have to be able to open up a conversation to help them grow help them grow psychologically and spiritually. You know, that's what we have to do. And people will grow and advance in different ways and different levels, but it has to be, it's the only way forward. Because if we say we're only talking to certain people, to certain men, and we're not going to talk about this topic or that topic, or we're not dealing with the real issues in society. And there literally is no problem a man will face that he can't resolve he can't resolve if he wants to. You know, the Christ is there, he's offering his means. And I think it's up to us now to step forward and to bring the grace into people's lives, to start shining into people's lives. I mean, there's a guy I know, Liam Stewart, and he offers 1 day 12-step programs up in Derry. I put the flyer out and on on the I have a WhatsApp group to about 300 men, and I send it out, and he, you know, there's stuff there. It's just getting it known. And I suppose that's the channel, because my videos just pop up in the weirdest places and people listen to them, and my rants. And for whatever reason, they'll reach out and they'll talk it out. I said, look, there's nothing you're going through that can't be helped. You know, there is help, there is grace, and I don't judge people. I just listen to them. That's what needs to be done in the church. You know, I think we're killing ourselves by not talking stuff out, about not talking traumas out, and people could save themselves years, because a lot of these things that goes on in people's heads, the traumas that the depressions, it impacts their body a lot. You know, if you literally get sick physically, like a lot of the illnesses, your immune system, and it's all connected. And so we need to sort people psychologically, spiritually. So, you know, like, I mean, if you're at peace, if you're getting a good night's sleep, and you're not taking drugs to get to sleep, you know, because a lot of people are taking Valiums or whatever, God knows, stuff to sleep. If you're at peace, your life gets changed. So it does. It just my reflections on it anyway.
No, like you say, you reminded me of actually when I was worse with anxiety. The overthinking leads to the anxiety. The body starts showing signs that the power of the brain's doing that. And I did have that kind of frog in the throat feeling. It was making me like belch, but I mean, it was never sick, but it was just the muscles. It was the constant there. And it was just because of over worrying and overthinking and stress. And it was at a point where the mind had so much it overflowed into the body.
Yeah.
And the gluttony, the eating, putting weight on, everything was connected, getting run down, the immune system, everything was connected.
Yeah,
Everything.
exactly. Yeah.
And I think not just that part, but everything, because eventually things come up from the surface that you don't realize it's there. Well, some people that do know what it is. It's the one particular thing, the one particular person, event, or whatever. But it's like he says earlier, and it's easier said than done. I get that, but forgiveness is not for them. The forgiveness is for
It's for
you.
you. Exactly.
You know, it's you. It needs to
Exactly.
forgive for you
Yeah.
to be free.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many times eventually I've spoken to people. In fact, I had a catch up with an old community member I haven't seen in what, 15 years, maybe once years ago. And even just getting invited over for a cuppa and a chat, the way we're speaking now as grown men compared to
Yeah.
18 years ago is completely, you need to realize he's aged, I've aged, we've had our journeys. And then a couple of things, it says half things I couldn't even remember.
Yeah.
I could remember. But
Yeah.
I'm not, the difference is I'm not saying it with anger and holding on to it, because years ago I chose to forgive.
Yeah.
I obviously haven't forgotten, but at least we're talking about it in friendlier terms. But the fact that I can speak about it with a laugh or a smirk,
Yeah.
15 years ago, I would have been in his face with rage. Now, how
Yeah.
can the same thing with the same person be so different after time?
Yeah.
And I believe it's back to the forgiveness. It's a part of growing and experiencing life and that. But the forgiveness is for you personally. And if anyone's listening, that's what it is. If there's a terrible thing that's happened to you, a real terrible thing, and that person needs to face justice, well, the justice belongs to God. I mean, if there's things that go through the law and all the rest of it, but the justice will be served. It has to be. That's the whole point at the end of time. But the forgiveness is not for them. The forgiveness is for you.
Yeah.
That's why Jesus says, forgive 7 times 70 or 70 times. Forgive infinitely.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, think of Jesus on the cross. He forgave every one of them. He says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Constant, because you don't want the poison in yourself.
Yeah.
That's what it is. The forgiveness is the remedy to get rid of the poison. And like I was saying earlier in my own story, you might have to keep saying it. You might have to reinforce it. It's the will. You know, it's the will. So it's not how you feel. You might still feel terrible. You might still feel angry. But I choose to forgive, Lord. I choose to forgive.
Yeah.
Heal
Yeah.
me. And if you
Yeah.
need to do it 100 times, 1,000 times, you do it every time the challenge comes up. Maybe in a month, 6 months, a year, finally it's broken.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
everything else, a bit of prayer life, a bit of talking about it, get everything out. But the healing process begins with the will to forgive.
Yeah.
That's what I would say my experience, you know.
Yeah. No, it's true. Like I remember I met a guy and we'd been seminarians together, and he brought up a comment I made, and this was 20 years ago, which I totally forgotten. And it wasn't in malice. It was just like, oh, you won't be able to do this or something like that. And he and you know, at some stages in the life when you're so mature, you make these stupid things, comments, and it impacts them more than you think. This guy, whatever way he took it, and he threw it back at me 20 years later. And I said, I just don't remember. I know I said it, but I just don't remember that I said it. But I knowing the way I was then, I'm sure I did say it, but it wasn't like anything. It was just like a, bit of banter and stuff like that. And we forget, he remembered it and he was carrying that whatever way it was in his memory and stuff like that for years. And I think, I think we're all a little bit guilty of inflicting some type of pain on others. Sometimes we focus on our own pain, but we forget about, sometimes we pass it on. And that's where the gospel and Christ's message becomes really important. You have to digest it, and you have to be thinking, what am I saying and what am I doing, my actions, because Christ said, if somebody slaps you, give them the other cheek. And that's really hard. For men, if you just think about it, the whole if you really dig into the message, if you really meditated on it, it's like we have to become sponges that um absorb the pain, but we don't hold it. We're not passing on in the resentment, the pain to other people. It takes a lifetime. I wish I mean, the videos are here now, so my kids will look at them years to come and stuff like that. But it'd be great if we could have dialed this back 20-30 years ago and said, look, you can avoid all this pain and all this suffering. Just, this is the rules of life, and this is how you to act and with yourself and to others, and to get those conversations going, because schools don't do this anymore. They have great programs about bullying, but they don't get people talking. And this is the sad reality, because if they did, the problems we're seeing we wouldn't be seeing in society. Society is very focused on education, career, job, past.
Nonsense. Well,
Yeah, but like look, I think it's a new era for the faith. It's an amazing new challenge to bring the gospel back into the world, to bring the gospel back into Ireland in a totally different way, in Ireland and the UK, in a totally different way than previous generations did. Because if you're honest about what happened in the church pre-Vatican II, you have to acknowledge the issues that were there in the church. I mean, they were there in the church. It's at some stage somebody has to realize Father Marcial, this great abuser or whatever, he founded the Legionaries of Christ in 1941 in this so-called, golden era of Catholicism, when vocations were growing and things were booming in the church and everything was going up year after year. Oh, okay, guys, but it wasn't just Father Maciel. There's a number of different people. So look, this is a time to learn, to examine, and to grow, and to try and not make the same mistakes again. You're never going to have perfection, but you can be responsible for yourself. I can't solve the world, but I can solve myself, and I can solve those around me.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered a good bit on it. I mean, it wasn't planned or scripted or anything, but here we are freely speaking about it. It's easy. The first time's harder, the second time's still hard, third time gets easier, and so on and so on. But it's made me an open, because I used to be quite closed off, I would say.
Yeah.
I think again, it just you go into yourself, But that's not, and I think thankfully with the faith, it got me doing YouTube. It's got me openly talking. I can give testimonies anytime. You know, God's brought me along a big journey, and He toughens you up in the right ways.
Yeah.
Sure. And if anyone's listening to this, anyone at all, I know we're speaking especially about men, and it was everything that we know with the data and the statistics and stuff. But there's always comment section, there's always the emails, you know, there's always ways prayer requests. We'll
Yeah.
always give it to them, you know, we're there
Yeah.
for them. And that leads me on maybe now to highlight the fact that there's a couple of, well, it was Men basically, isn't it? Coming up
Yeah.
for and Glasgow. You
What
want to tell you
you
want to tell
talk
us
about?
about Walsingham first, and I'll tell you about Glasgow.
Well, Walsingham, there's the men's retreat. It's on the 20, the men's pilgrimage,
Nine.
Catholic. Yeah, it's the last. Oh gosh, I should have been prepared for this. Let me bring up my calendar here.
Yeah, I was going to do the same.
So it's May,
April.
April the 23rd. So we're
3rd.
yeah. So if anybody's around Walsingham on April the 22nd, that's Saturday, we'll be in Walsingham. There'll be other guys in Walsingham for Catholic Men UK. So just come along. Sam Baker, I think he'll be there, and other guys. So you know, if you're looking, just touch base with us. Send us an email. We'll be over there. I'll be traveling over with you in your Mercedes. So I think you've offered to bring me along.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having you over as well, seeing you
Yeah.
in person for the first time. I think when we're that used to screens, it's like when you see each other in person, it's going to look weird for the first hour, maybe. But that's
Look,
part of a Facebook group as well, isn't it, that we've
it
joined?
is. It is. It is. So if anybody,
Again, we
any
can look
men,
at leaving a link maybe for
yeah,
what's
yeah,
the group?
exactly. But I do encourage any men, like, form your groups, get the prayer groups, St. Joseph's men's prayer groups. I do join them, and if people want links to different prayer groups, let me know. We're trying to get these going in Ireland. It came to me twice in adoration, with all the stuff that was going on here, and our Lord said, Robert, I want you to start a prayer group, and he specifically said Men of St. Joseph, and he put the card, Simon Lee's card, that I'd taken a photo of in Derry, and it was like coming to mind, and I reached out to Simon Lee, and actually he sent me on that text by the Bishop of Olmsted. I did a video on that. I put it on my channel as well, which was really, really good text, you know, and for men, stuff like this. So we'll see there's a lot of stuff happening at this moment in time. So you want to talk about Glasgow?
Yeah, so well, we're just it's nothing to do with me. It's actually my dad. He's been looking to get a Rosary Day done. I think like yourself in Derry, and we're seeing ones in Poland and America, and I think there has been some in the UK as well already. So he was just waiting to get council approval just in case of anything and that with permission, depending on the crowd that might come. But he has had confirmation today, so it'll
Okay.
be the first Saturday of the month. So we're looking at Saturday, April 1st, All Fool's Day. And I'm like, be a fool for Jesus, be a fool for the Lord. So Saturday, April 1st, 10:30 a.m. is the gathering at George Square, Glasgow City Centre, followed right in with the Rosary at 11 a.m. And they're putting out there for men of faith. They really want the men
Yeah.
Rosary group. So I know there's a few churches round about, and I know being the first Saturday, there might be mass on, confessions if you want to do the first Saturday devotion. But because of the timing and try to get things done, the gathering is going to focus around the Rosary. So gather at George Square on Saturday, April 1st at 10:30 a.m. Begin the Rosary at 11 a.m. And that might just be the first moment where people are getting to speak, where men are coming together. We're going to put the word out in another video. We're going to get posters. We're putting out to the bishops and everyone else, try and get as many as possible, and all the prayer groups get spreading the word. And it's when afterwards what happens. You know,
Yeah.
and this is where you'll find people that are in the Men of St. Joseph's prayer group. They're in another prayer group in this church. Some people may have travelled from afar. I mean, you said guys in Derry coming from over in England and everything, didn't you?
Yeah. And
So,
America.
and
And
America.
is America, Italy, England, they came from everywhere. I mean, all over Ireland, Kerry, Cork, and constantly. When are you doing it in Cork? When you do it in Cork, I get this question all the time. You know, it's like but you know, it has to be something that the church accepts and the church wants to do. It's not Robert Nugent at the end of the day. It's, you know,
Yeah,
let.
that's where I always keep the things at bay. Because, you know, the one thing I've never forgotten is a priest said once, he quoted some cardinal and says, you know, God will judge us for the bad that we did, but also
Yeah,
the good that we did that was not part of his will. And
yeah,
what does that mean?
yeah,
And later in life, when I was ready to go to sermon, I'm thinking, is this me? Is this God and everything?
mm,
And, the
yeah,
sermon. I love the
yeah,
Imitation of Christ book. And it says, and I never forgot it, it says, remember, even good intentions have their roots in self-pride.
yeah,
That's where anytime I do a video, anytime I do anything with all good intentions, like Lord, if this isn't you, don't let anything come of it. If it
yeah.
is for you, it is for you, and if it's for you're happy with it, go for it.
Oh,
I
oh,
give
look,
everything to him, and that's it. You know,
yeah,
this has
oh,
nothing to do with me as such. I'm just doing my part and getting the word out there for it. And again, if people want to come on and do that, anything when it comes to God, you know, people are asking me about things, you know, do it about Our Lady because they've got some things coming up. It's like I ain't ever refusing to do something for Mama Mary.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? She's got a
yeah,
special place in my heart for sure.
yeah. I suppose there's always that element, you know, of ego of you know, it's hard to get the balance right, because. You look around the church and I feel very frustrated. I felt, you know, God, we could be doing so much more, and then you finally have to ask, well, okay, you have to do it yourself. You know, you have to get out there, drive the conversation, organize the adoration, and if people want to do it, they do it. If they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it, and there's nothing I can do, you know. And you know, it's not about egos, you know, it's about people's lives. You know, this is where people need to understand. I just think what Christ wants us to do is important at this moment in time, and let him drive it, let him be in the driver's.
Well, the other thing I'll finish off with there actually is I know we were speaking months ago before Christmas, and afterwards I'm like, I maybe start up a prayer group then for men. And I
Yeah,
felt good about it, you know, because it wasn't even something on the mind. It wasn't even the topic what we were discussing that day. It was us breaking the ice. But I felt good for a couple of days after. It's like, you know what, let it settle, see where it is in a week and that. And it was still there a bit, but nothing came about. But then after the first video with you, I'm hearing from other guys and saying things, and I'm like, right, let's get into it then, let's go for it. I find myself where it comes to me from others and the doors open from them.
yeah,
I'm more ready to walk through that door rather than try to do one myself.
yeah,
I'm finding that's the way I'm noticing things moving for me in the right way just now. And again, I can only follow after 8 years of YouTube on and off, on and off. Now that there's a clear focus in life, there's a clear focus on the channel. All of a sudden, like never in the last 8 years, all this connectivity and it's all the
yeah,
faith. So
yeah,
again, I'm just doing what I always did when I
yeah,
was bothered. But now there's a clear focus, there's a clear momentum, there's overwhelming networking happening here, and it's all for God.
yeah,
And I was in mass there Sunday night, and left it after praying. You know, what do you want me to do, Lord? Hope again want to do His will. And I never heard back from one of the churches that I wrote to about the prayer group after speaking to the couple of guys at phone, Simon and Gary. And I was out speaking to the priest who happened to be Scottish, and he says, "Oh, listen, you know, if you..." And as soon as I was going to say to him after a few minutes conversation, I was ready to say the words about Men of St. Joseph or a men's prayer group. And just as I was ready to say it, he says, "You know, if you want to get more busier in the parish, you know, you're always more than welcome. It's good to have you here, fellow Scotsman, even blah, blah." I says, well, the words on the tip of my tongue were about a men's prayer group, you know, in particular. And I was thinking Men St. Joseph, I'm in touch with people, but tell him. I says, you know, especially men need it, Father, these days. He says, absolutely. So
yeah,
whatever he's saying that for and all the rest of it. So I'm going to send him things that Simon sent me and attachments about the prayer group, the history and
yeah,
whatever. And hopefully that's going to start up.
Yeah.
And after that started up, I think it's a good place to fall back on after we get maybe another rosary gathering down here in the Midlands, maybe.
Yeah.
We're here
Just
in the
never know.
Midlands.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
But
It's
again, I don't want, because I think if you start going with ego and keeping control, you end up with your own battle. And it
yeah.
ain't, just keep yourself dispensed. Go with the spirit. The Lord wants to scoop me up and take me back to Scotland the way he scooped up St. Philip a while ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, look, I have to sign off here.
No, we've done, something, we've covered a great deal, and I think the clear focus really went in there with that men's health stuff. I think that's something really good. I'm glad we've done that because,
Yeah.
again, this was quite unscripted. But for whatever people take from it, you know where to leave the comments. Give Robert's channel a look up as well. It's De Crevy, determined to be Catholic.
Catholic. Yeah.
Yeah, you just put that in there and you'll find them. And again, I'll leave all the links below. The men's prayer, the men's Facebook group as well. But can you just tell us quickly what that's called again, Robert?
It's Catholic Men UK, but if people want to link in, just email us on our channels. Just contact us, and we'll link you in there. And if you're looking, we're trying to list out where we can where the Catholic men's prayer groups are. And just one thing on the men's prayer groups, and if people were thinking about it, don't overthink it. Focus on 1 hour once a week, and that's it to start off with, and then expand out from there. I think as Catholic men, we should dedicate 1 hour once a week to this apostolate on evangelizing men in UK and in Ireland, and just commit to that and to see where it goes. And I definitely do think that it's going to transform the church if we committed to it, and don't go asking the bishop and the priest to organize it. As laymen, you do it. You step out there, organize it, and if nobody comes, you're left there praying on your own. You're there with the Holy Spirit and Our Lady and Saint Joseph and our Lord. You never know who will reach out to you. So just do it.
Amen. Just do it. That's it.
Just,
Nike. Just do it.
just do it.
Just do it.
Anyway, I have to hide.
Excellent, Robert. Thanks again. God bless.
Your best. Just stop recording.